Hi, welcome back to me talking about my version of the Marauders in podcast form with Emma. Yeah, it's the second to last episode today. It should be fun, and guess what? I actually remembered to ask questions.
Oh yeah.
We're
professional.
I'm basically killing it. I'm a professional now. Yeah, I've never done anything wrong with this podcast ever.
Never.
Let's take a look. Oh, this is an important one. The colors that are associated with each like school subject.
Oh.
Like, what do you do with each one? This is very, helpful because we are going back to school. So
I have a not very controversial one, but science is green.
oh, of course, science is green, but actually, okay, but sometimes science is yellow. Sometimes.
No.
Oh, okay. Because that was just what all of my science books when I was homeschooled, that's what they were. They were all yellow. But yeah, so I think science is green or yellow. Okay, math, controversial take. Math is black. I've only ever had a black binder, a black folder for everything with math, and it can't be any other color. I'm like, it is only black. What are your thoughts on math?
Red.
Red. I've seen a lot of people say blue. But for me, red is history.
Oh.
What is that for you?
Purple.
Okay, purple, yeah. I can see that one.
Or orange.
Orange, no. Orange is not history.
Could be, though.
Okay, and then
English is yellow.
English? Yeah, English can be a lot of things. I usually don't have, like, a set, like, English thing. I feel like it's, like, white or something. I'm very basic with my colors. I'm, like, black and white, literally. Those are my colors.
Okay, but usually, like, what I do now is I just get, like, one, like,
I
of the,
know.
like, 5 subject notebooks.
Yeah, and I just got a white one for,
everything.
like, the whole year. I'm like, I got a white 5-subject notebook, and I will probably not need anything else for the rest of the year. So, yeah. Somebody asked, if the Marauders were in a band, what instrument would each of them play?
James would sing.
James would sing, okay. Would he also play lead guitar, or would he
Yeah.
just sing? Okay, so he would do that. Sirius has to play the bass, obviously. And Peter is on drums and Remus is on keys.
Sure. I was gonna say Peter drums, but then I couldn't think of another instrument.
Okay, I feel like Peter's on drums and Remus is just like whatever miscellaneous instrument they feel
Remus
like they
just
need.
plays literally everything.
He's
else.
like, they're like, hey, can we get a trombone part for this part? And he's like, yes.
Yeah. He just
Let's
has
do
it in his pocket. He just pulls it out.
He's like, boop, boop, boop. That's the sound a trombone makes. Somebody asked what my favorite stuffed animal is, and I'm like, for me it's Bowie, and I think for Emma it's Jeffrey.
No, I have a dog at home.
Oh, you have a
Stuffed
animal dog?
animal
Or just
And
like
a
a
real
regular?
one.
Yeah, I was like, you have a real dog too. But yeah, I think mine is Bowie, who just got named. I like the name I was hoping for from the beginning. Okay, what is your favorite like milkshake flavor?
Okay.
Or like a Blizzard from that might be easier. A Blizzard from Dairy Queen. What's your go-to?
I don't ever go to Dairy Queen.
You're a menace to society. I get like an M&M one. Those are always good.
I like the like peach milkshake is really good.
Oh yeah, peach milkshake, fantastic.
Or just like cookies and cream, or like the Oreo ones.
I don't like those.
Those are so good.
I'm sorry, I can't get on board with those. The only like chocolate chunkety thing I can do is the M&M ones.
Well,
I can't do
because like,
anything else
but the
that has,
Oreo
like,
just like
the
mixes
chunks.
in better.
See, but I don't like. It's like a grainy texture then.
It's so
And I'm like,
good.
I don't like it.
It's so good.
I
Wow.
don't know. I gotta have larger chunks of things. I gotta have those big chunks. Somebody else says Percy Jackson or Harry Potter, and I'm like, this is a Marauders podcast. Other things. Oh yeah, somebody asked what happened to Aspen Perks from the beginning, and I'm like, she's
off living
I'm
her
like,
best
she's
life.
living her best life. Like if you don't hear from
She's
a
the one
character,
who actually choreographed the whole.
oh my gosh, of course she did.
So
Yeah.
She's doing well.
She's doing great. No, but I'm like, if you don't hear about a character at some point, it probably means that they're doing just fine. They are, like, living their best life away from these chaotic people, and that's all you need to know. So yeah, if you don't hear from somebody, it means that they're doing okay, as a general rule. Oh, somebody said that they binged the whole podcast in under 24 hours, and I'm like,
wow,
I'm
that's
like,
a lot.
I'm like, that's like, I have to look at the full runtime of everything, but I'm like, did you sleep?
Yeah.
I'm like,
because there's like 17 episodes,
and they're all like an hour or
Yeah.
less than an hour.
Wow,
long.
that's
So
impressive.
That's a lot. I would never do that. Like with anything ever, even if
we
I
just
made it.
we just actually record it all. Just we haven't stopped, and
Yeah.
we just like change clothes so it looks like we do.
Yep, except for the times we don't change
Yeah.
clothes.
Sometimes we're running low on outfits, and you just have to power through a couple.
Yeah, it'll be fine. Alright, so I think that's it on questions. Do you have anything fun that you would like to update the world with?
I don't know. We had cake last night.
We did have cake last night. We, I don't know, we've made it like a low-key tradition.
We've done it twice.
We've done it twice, so like now it's a tradition. Where when I hit a milestone on TikTok or YouTube or something, honestly, it's just whenever we feel like eating cake, we go and we get a cake, and then we eat it in a parking lot, like outside, like on the ground of a parking lot, in the dead of night. So we did that last night, and it was really fun. Okay,
It's so funny how this time it was just both in me and Lily's siblings.
I know. Last time it was like, you know, all of my friends, and this time it was literally just like me and Emma and another friend of ours and her little sister and Emma's and Swanky.
Swanky.
And that was it.
Was fun.
Yeah, it was pretty great. All right, episode 19. Are we ready?
I don't know.
I'll remind you what just happened.
I think I remember.
I'll remind you anyway. So yeah, Remus just went and sat down in front of Lily in the Great Hall. Everybody shook. What is happening? We're jumping in right here. All right. So the whole castle is like, what is happening? The professor is too. They're like, oh, this is tea.
Huh?
Like, okay.
Madame Pomfrey's like, I knew it.
She's like, they've been dating this whole time. But no one is as surprised as James. Nobody. James is sitting there.
Peter like knew.
At least Sirius knew too.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah. Anyway, so he's literally sitting there, mouth open. Food probably fell out. Like he's like literally just like, what? He's like, I don't like this. I don't understand it, and I would not like for this to continue happening. But yeah, so he's like, are you guys like seeing this? He's like, is this happening?
He's like,
he's like, look at that. And Cedar and Pierce are like, yep, we do in fact see it.
Oh my gosh. I'm so shocked.
They're like, what?
Crazy.
But yeah, so I said, and James was like, why? What? How? The man is just sputtering. That is an exact
James.
quote from what I wrote. The man, yeah, he's just sputtering.
He's
like,
shocked
he's
for
like,
sure.
I don't know. And so Sirius is like, okay, I have something to tell you. And James is like, what?
He's like,
no, but James is like, how could this happen? This came out of nowhere. And Sirius is like, well, listen, I'm sure that they're not like best friends or anything. You know, he's trying to calm down James. And that's what he thinks, right? And then some kids walk by, and then, like, some other, like, Gryffindors walk by, and they were just next to them, and they're like, oh my gosh, Remus literally just said that he's best friends with Lily. Like, as soon as Sirius is like, I'm sure they're not best friends, they're like, guys, they're best friends. And James is like,
take that, James.
James is still just, like, in total and complete shock here. And Sirius is like, oh, shoot. And, yeah, James is like, this totally came out of nowhere. He's like, how would we have even, like, how? We've never even seen them talk to each other. And then Sirius just, like, is looking very guilty. He's like, And so then he's like,
Peter's like, I've literally hung out with both of them.
literally. But then James is like, it did come out of
came out of
nowhere,
nowhere,
right? Sirius? Right, Sirius? And Sirius is like, okay, well, I'm sorry, but I did know that they were on speaking terms. And James is like, oh my god!
And you didn't tell me, wow.
It's like, what?
I'm so betrayed. This was the real betrayal.
This
was why everyone believes Sirius betrayed them.
Yeah, but he's like, you knew that they were speaking to each other? And he's like, listen, he told me after that whole, like, oh, they were dating thing happened a while ago. And it makes sense because, like, he would not want to tell you after you think that they're, like, dating. He's like, it made sense, but he told me that they weren't, like, friends. He just said that they, like, talked because they're prefects together. And James is like, this is still a betrayal. But James is also trying to calm himself down, and he's like, okay,
and Peter's
maybe,
just, like, slowly.
Sure. Peter's just moving away. No, but James is trying to calm himself down. He's like, okay, you know what? Sure. He's like, you're right. Sirius, he probably would tell you about it. You know, you guys are, like, objectively the closest out of all of us. He's like, I guess it makes sense. And then he glances over at Peter, and Peter's just sitting there, and he's, like, silently looking straight ahead, not paying attention. He's just very, very guilty. And James just looks at him, and he's like, he told you too? And Peter's like, yeah, so I actually spent an entire day with both of them. And James and Sirius. And
he's like, remember how you guys are banned from Hogsmeade and I'm not?
And they're like, literally, what happened here? They're like so shocked. But yeah, so like Peter has to explain this whole thing, and he's like, listen, Remus told me not to tell, and I thought it would be really complicated, but like, yeah, they really did seem like really good friends. And they're both like, why would you not tell us this?
He's like, Sirius didn't tell either.
He's like, yeah, but Sirius heard like, oh, maybe they're kind of friends. You hung out with her.
They're like, you're friends with her too. They're like, why don't you go sit with them?
Literally. But no, so like everybody's, it's a complicated conversation that they have. But then, yeah, so that's happening. And like also like there's these types of conversations happening literally all over the Great Hall of everybody being like, what is happening here? But Snape just gets up and leaves.
He's like, I'm out.
He's like, I'm angry. And he just walks out. But yeah, the professors are surprised, and the prefects who like had seen them do their rounds together, but even they like saw them like chat. But again, chatting and like literally Remus ditching his friends for Lily are like,
we're besties.
They're like very different things. But all of the prefects are like, we called it. We knew it was that. They're all like gossiping like crazy.
They're like, we knew.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
But yeah, but
they go over to Madame Pomfrey and they're like, oh my gosh, did you see this?
Literally. But no, but it's just a wacky sight to see them just like laughing and talking to each other this whole time. And also, the laughing and talking, they're totally playing it up for everybody. Like,
as you do.
Like, what did I say? Like, Lily will be like, okay, Remus, James is watching. Now, I'm gonna make a joke and you have to laugh, okay? It's like, okay.
Wow.
So yeah, that's how the first breakfast goes. Absolutely a good time. We love it. Just utter chaos. James feels so betrayed. But yeah, so then the next scene is just kind of like all of the different classes throughout this whole day. Because like, okay, so they finish their, no, they still have their transfiguration exam today.
Oh.
But then they still have other classes for like the rest of the time there, but it's like they're like classes that are like, oh, this is what we're gonna be doing next year, and like nothing's graded and stuff like that. But anyway, so like later in like potions.
They just like do cahoots.
Yes, they do cahoots. And that's it. But anyway, but Lily and Remus just pair up for everything in all of these classes. And like it's the last little bit of the year, so like none of the teachers really care. But then that leaves Kingsley with Sirius for everything.
He was doing so well. He hadn't been mentioned, and now he's getting roped back in.
I know. But Kingsley's just so done with this. No, mean to them. So, like, he'll talk with Sirius and everything like that. But Sirius he has just decided to be so overdramatic about this entire thing.
He usually just puts, like, a silencing charm on him, and he's like, I don't know, man. He's just so shocked he can't talk.
Sounds like a Kingsley thing to do. But no, Sirius is just, like, they'll just be sitting in class, and, like, Kingsley will be like, okay, do you want to talk about, like, anything normal? And he's like, no, let's talk about how Remus left us. Again, for the 5th time today. Let's talk about it. And
he's like, Kingsley's like, were you this mad when I left?
He's like, no.
He's like, no, I did not care.
Oh my gosh, no, but he's like...
No, he's like, yes, we cried for weeks. And he's like, completely, like... telling the truth.
Honestly, I think maybe they
were just all that upset.
They were very upset with that. No, but Sirius is completely overdramatic, and he'll, like, say, like, very loudly, like, when Remus is within earshot, he'll be like, anyway, Kingsley, since the group is ruined now, you may as well come back to the dorm, because, you know, we'll need, you know, some extra people. It's not like we're this friend group anymore. And Kingsley's like, I'm not coming back to the dorm. He's like, I will never be returning to that dorm ever
Kingsley
again.
just, like, looks over at Remus, just no expression.
No, he's just like, I literally hate you for doing this to me. He's like, I wasn't even friends with Lily, but this was so much better. But yeah. But the only person who, like, actually, truly saw it coming was the arithmetic teacher, Professor Vector. And, like, as he's, like, handing out, like, papers or, like, an activity or something, when he comes up to their table, he's like, guys, I always knew.
They're like, oh my god.
They're like, oh my gosh. He's like, I'm so glad that you guys are, like, showing that you're friends now. I don't know, when you live with all of your students,
that's true.
It's like you get invested, I'm sure. But yeah, and the prefects are still going around telling the whole school. They're, like, telling stories about them. They're like, yep, they do all their rounds together. They do everything. And frankly, like, Lily and Remus are feeling fantastic. They're like, this is so much fun for no reason. Especially Lily. Because she's like, listen, just, like, stop being friends with Snape, and it's, like, this huge deal, and he's super upset about it, and, like, I'm kind of feeling great. But Remus is a little less so, because he's like, okay, like, I know my friends aren't actually terrible people, they've just been acting terrible, so he's like, this feels great, but, like, in a temporary step in the right direction type of thing. Like, he knows that he's not gonna stop being friends with them, but he likes making James think that maybe he's gonna stop being friends with them for a little bit. It's just, I don't know. But yeah, or at least Lily would be perfectly fine if it wasn't for Snape literally just, like, every second of every day being like, I'm so sorry, Lily. And she's like, I do not care. She's like, we get that scene in the 7th book in Deathly Hallows where, you know, it's like a flashback and he's, like, literally outside of the Gryffindor common room, like, waiting until, like, 2 a.m. And yeah, it's bad. But he's like, yeah, it just slipped out. I didn't mean to call you a mudblood. And she's like, oh my gosh. It's just all of this stuff. It's just not great.
Wow.
Yeah. So, you know, she's, like, complaining about this to Remus, obviously, and he's like, what can I do to help? And she's like, just stay being besties with me, honestly. And he's like, I'm perfectly happy doing that. You know, this is great. And James is just getting more and more bitter. Peter feels so bad. And Sirius is, like, shockingly, like...
He feels kind of betrayed, too.
He feels betrayed, too, but he's, like, way more okay with it than the others are. Because he kind of thinks that it's funny, too. He's like, I respect this. This took a lot of, like...
He's like, I can recognize a good prank.
Yeah. He's like, yeah. But also, he's like, I don't know, he just had the like, whole prank situation happen. And he's like, this is not nearly as bad as
he's
that
like,
was.
This isn't directed at me.
Yeah, he's like,
good.
I'm good. But he's like, I know Remus. He's never gonna, like, stop being friends with us. So, like, I can respect this, you know? But James is like, this is life or death, you know? There is no coming back from this, or anything like that. And he's like, I will literally always despise Remus, and he will always hate me. But Sirius is like, this isn't gonna last.
James is like, literally, like, the next day it's gonna be fine.
Yeah, he's like, guys, don't worry about this. But anyway, at one point, James pulls Remus aside, and he's like, what the heck? He's like, literally, he's like, what are you thinking? He's like, how long have you been friends? Blah, 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 blah. And Remus is like, yep, that's what you get for claiming that I can't make any friends without, like, your guys' help. That's what you said on that argument. And, like, guess what? She doesn't beat people up. So, like, what can I say? And he's like, I can actually make friends with people that, like, would never dream of talking to you. And, like, this whole thing. But they're both trying to be like, fine. I'm like, I'm not even your friend anymore. Like, it's whatever. But then
James is like,
the last
tomorrow he's
minute-
gonna show up with Snape. And
be like besties with Snape for revenge. Snape.
not Snape. Remus. No, Snape.
Stop, I can't do this. No, but he's like, but then, like, at the last minute, they're like, fine, and they, like, leave. And then, but then, like,
It's
James
the
turns,
same
but
direction.
then James turns around and he's like, but are you dating her?
He's like, yes.
No, and Remus is like, no. And James is like, how do I know that you're telling the truth? Because apparently you've been lying about everything. And he's like, James, I would never do that. he's like, James, no matter how bad things got, I would never, like, date, like, the person that you're in love with. He's like, never. And James is like, okay, cool.
I'm about to cry now.
He's like, it's fine. And so, like, it leaves. And I wrote, and James is like, okay, so maybe the bro code isn't completely broken.
Of course, that's what he would be thinking.
Yes.
Not like, okay, maybe we can still be friends.
Well, yeah, but, like, that's kind of what I mean. He's
James.
like, okay, the friendship isn't completely gone because he's not dating Lily, so it's all good.
Wow.
Anyway. Oh, I didn't say this. So basically how, like, their daily routine goes is, like, they get up, they go to breakfast, eat separately, they go to class, they're always together, and then after class, they're always, like, in the library or in the common room together or whatever, and Remus is, like, always going to bed, like, later than everybody else, so, like, so they're all asleep or whatever. But the first night, he's, like, downstairs with Lily, and then when he comes upstairs, he's feeling all good. He opens his bed, his like 4-poster bed, and then he sits down, and then he like screams because
It's just like
Sirius is asleep on his bed, and he didn't realize when he sat on him.
Wow.
I said he's literally just in his bed snoozing. But he's like, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, "Listen." He's like, dude, calm down. Like, I wanted to make sure that I could talk to you. He's like, I feel like there's better ways to do this. He's like, no, this was the only way. But yeah, but he's like, first things first, I am sorry, genuinely, about what happened with Snape. You're right, completely. I was acting, like, horribly, and, like, you were right. Like, we were taking way too much joy out of that, and I'm realizing that, like, I'm kind of turning into my mom, and, like, don't want to do that. He's like, 0 out of 10. He's like, you're right. You know, we shouldn't be doing this while we're in school and everything like that. And it's, like, very genuine type thing. And also, he's, like, still half asleep because he literally just got woken up. He's like, I'm so sorry. But Remus is like, all right, thank you. And Sirius is like, you know, he's like, I really, like, want to be better at not doing this. He's like, I don't like doing it. I just, you know, feel like I can't not do it sometimes. And Remus is like thinking back to like when he literally punched Snape, and he's like, you know, I kind of get it. But yeah,
good for Sirius.
Yeah,
good job.
But yeah, but he says like, but Remus is like, yeah, but Sirius, you said this like the last time too. Like, not gonna lie, like with the whole prank thing, you were like, I'm never gonna like do anything to Snape, and then what did you do? You went and did something to Snape just like a couple weeks later. And he's like, listen, yes, but that's the point. And Sirius is like, I need you to like not to keep me from doing all the stuff like that. Like, he's like, I try, but it's just harder for me. Like, I don't know. Like, I need you, Remus. And Remus is like, why would you say that to me? And Remus is like, okay, so like, guess I gotta forgive you now because that was the sweetest thing I've ever heard in my life. But he's like, fine, but like, I can't just keep on being the mom of like this friend group like every single day. It's like, I can't keep on dealing with like the constant hexing in the halls. It feels like we're like 12 years old. And Sirius is like, okay, it won't happen again. I will stop it. I will just like stop doing this cold turkey. And he's like,
wow.
He's like, you're gonna stop, like, altogether? And he's like, yes. He's like, I would rather, he said, if it's a question between hexing Snape or keeping you as a friend, I'll choose you every time. No question. He's like, and he said there wasn't even a question, last night when they were having the argument. He said, I was just yelling. And Remus is like, you were hormonal. he's like, thanks, Remus. But Sirius was like, yeah, I really will try, like, my best to just not do anything. He's like, you're right, it's stupid, and I don't want to turn out like my family. And Remus is like, good enough for me.
Cool.
They're like, cool. So yeah, they're back to being besties. And Sirius is like, okay, so how good of friends have you been with Lily? He's like, I feel like we need to have this conversation. And Remus is like, yeah, so, like, actually, like, we've been besties for a while. And he's like, ugh. No.
And he's like, you're not actually best friends with her, though, right?
He's like, he like pretends to be like all offended about it. He's like, it's a girl, Remus. We don't make friends with girls. And he's like, what about Marlene or like Dorcas? And he's like, they don't count.
It doesn't count.
Lily counts though. But yeah, so they're just laughing about it. It's a good time. But finally at the end of it, Remus is like, okay, listen, it wasn't like you I was worried about. It's just like James. He's the instigator of most of this. Don't get me wrong, you do it too, but like, James has really become the, I'm just gonna hex people in the hallway and it's like whatever type of person. He's like, I just really need an apology from him. And like, and Sirius is like, okay, so I won't say that we like, made up and that we're friends until like James gets over this whole thing. And he's like, in the meantime, he's like, what are you gonna do? And Remus is like, honestly, I want to show Lily the map. Yay! It's the next day. James still has his head in his butt. He's still bitter about all of this. He's still like, this is the end of the Marauders as we know it.
Oh my gosh.
He's written to his parents about it. He's like, we'll never be friends again. I'm so sorry. Remus is never going to come visit again. And then Sirius also wrote a letter to them and was like, guys, it's going to be fine. James is just
like, it's literally just James. This is one side.
He's like, it's literally just James, and like Peter is believing James too much. But yeah. So that keeps on happening. But then James, whenever they're in, like, the library, like, whenever they're in, like, the wizard library section, James keeps on sending somebody with an invisibility cloak to, like, go check on them and, like, make sure that they're not being, like, besties. It's so middle school. He's so immature about this.
And, like, Sirius goes and he'll just, like, slightly move around the stuff. Like, Remus will know, but he can't be like, we have an invisibility cloak, surprise.
So anyway, they're in the Muggle library. He's like, hey, so do you remember that, like, piece of parchment a while ago that you, like, saw something on and then you wanted to figure it out? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, okay, well, I've decided to show you what it is. But first, it's, like, a big secret, and, like, this is, like, intense. And he's like, and I need you to, like, promise to, like, not tell anybody. And, like, it might be against the rules, so, like, just don't tell anybody. And she's like, Remus, I'm getting scared. And he's like, it's fine, I promise. But, like, just don't tell anybody. And she's like, okay. He's like, we've been working on it for years, especially me, so I feel like I'm allowed to share it with you. And she's like, okay. And so he does. Puts it on the table, and he's like, he tells her to tap it with her wand and to say, I solemnly swear that I'm up to no good. And she's like, I'm not saying that. And he's like, listen, Sirius chose the words. It was not me. I can't, that's the rules. You gotta do it. And she's like, okay. So she does. And she's like, holy crap, this is a map of Hogwarts. And he's like, yeah.
You guessed it.
He's like, good job. But then she, like, starts looking closer, and she's, like, absolutely nerding out. She's like, how did you get the staircases to move? How did you get all these things? And he's, like, telling her all the spells that they did and everything. She's in love with this. She's like, this is so cool. And she's like, how did you track everybody? He's like, well, remember that one time on the train when you saw us and we were going around to, like, literally every compartment? She's like, oh my gosh, you guys are insane. But she's like, okay, but where are we? And he's like, well, the room isn't on the map yet, or else, like, the others would have, like, found out about it. And so he's like, so do you want to do the honors of, like, helping me put it on the map with me? And she's like, yes, I do. And so at this point, they're just assuming that it's a magic door, and you have to think of it in order to appear. But soon, they're learning that that's not the case. As they're, like, going out, they're trying to, like, put it on the map. It's, like, impossible to plot, and he's so confused because they've been able to do everything else. But it's just really not working. So they decide, they, like, spend forever trying to figure out what spell they could use, how the door works and everything like that. And they end up going to the actual library to see if there's anything about, like, disappearing rooms or anything in Hogwarts and stuff like that. And then Lily is, like, you know, looking at the map, and Remus is looking at the stuff. And then she's like, Remus? She's like, what does this mean? And Remus looks, and, like, Peter's, like, directly across from them. Like, and he's just like, oh my gosh. And he literally reaches into the thin air and just grabs the invisibility cloak off of him. And he's like, Peter, what are you doing here? And he's like, can you please stop spying on me? And Peter is like, listen, I thought it was dumb too, but you showed her the map, dude! He's like, you told her about the map? And Remus is like, yeah, I made it. I have every right to tell her. And he's like, we all made it. You need the consent of the group here. And Remus is like, well, too late. Lily already knows. She's helping with it. And
I guess we gotta obliviate her. Dang.
No, but he's like, you just get to deal with it. And he's like, fine. And then Peter just sits down. And Remus is like, are you just gonna, like, chill here? And Peter's like, yep, I don't feel like going back and having to tell James about this. And Remus is like, fair. And so he and Lily just, like, go back to, like, figuring it out. And I don't know why this is so funny to me, but Peter's just, like, sitting there and just not saying anything. And then finally Peter's like, listen, it's been horrible without you. James is, like, in such a bad mood. And I mean, like, even Marlene and Dorcas have just stopped hanging out with us because of everything. And it's just, like, he's just been so bad. And Remus is like, that is unfortunate. I'm too bad. But Peter's like, we all miss you, Remus. Like, even James, he's just way too stubborn to say it. And Remus is like, well, good to know.
He's like, that's the issue.
He's like, but I miss you guys too. And then Remus is just going back to, like, explaining something random to Lily, who's just, like, so confused by this. Like, what is happening? She's like, he's just chilling here? Is that just, okay. And then, like, in a couple of minutes, Peter just stands up and he's like, okay, I'm going back. If I can get James on board, will you just, like, please talk with us, like, soon and just get this figured out? Like, I can't deal with it anymore. And Remus is like, yeah, sure. But anyway, back to Remus and Lily. They're very invested in this. They try and, like, go back to the door, and they can't figure it out. And it's very sad. But yeah. So yeah, that was, like, that one, I think I made that sound like it was, like, the same day as something. But anyway, it's, like, it's progressing. It's been a couple days. But that night, Remus comes back up, and to his surprise, James is not asleep. He's fully awake.
Like, he's, like, on Remus's bed.
I don't think he's on Remus's bed. He's not quite as intrusive, but he's, like, sitting on, like, the trunk at the foot of his bed, and he's like, I'm waiting. And he's fully awake. And he's like, you told Lily about the map.
Peter, come on.
And he's like, yeah, I helped make it. And James is like, but she's gonna tell everybody. And don't you care about that staying a secret? You worked so hard on it. And Remus is like, listen, James, I don't know she's like, I trust Lily. Like, she wouldn't tell anybody. And James is like, how would you know? And Remus is like, well, she hasn't said anything about any of the secret passageways I've shown her throughout the year. And James is like, I'm so done with you, dude. But Remus is like, listen, James, I don't know where you got this, like, fake version of Lily in your head, but she's, like, chill. And, like, you need to chill about her. You need to get over her and, like, actually get to know her sometimes. She's not, like, this weird person that you think she is. And James is like, don't worry, I'm fully over her. And Remus is like, okay, sure. Sure, like, James, go ahead and tell yourself that. And then he just goes to sleep. But anyway, in a couple days, like, Lily and Remus have spent way too long trying to figure out, like, this room. They're, like, not having a good time. They don't know what it is. They're stressing themselves out so much. It, like, won't show up at all. And then they decide to go. to the kitchens for a snack. And Lily had, like, never been to the kitchens before. Like, she knew it existed. Yeah. She knew kids went there, but she just never had. And so she's like, ooh, this is fun. And then Remus, they're like, what have you guys, the house elves are like, what have you guys been working on? And he tells them. And, you know, he's describing what it was. And he's like, have you guys ever seen it? Because, like, you guys cleaned the castle or whatever. And they're like, oh, my gosh, you found the come-and-go room. And he's like, the what? And, like, an elf, like, explains it to him. Oh. And, they're like, you know, he explains it, and he's like, no, yeah, it's like, it is whatever you want it to be. And they're like, oh my gosh, it's whatever you want it to be. We've just been doing, like, one thing. And so after they finish eating, they go back, and Lily lets Remus try this time, and he, like, walks back and forth, just like the elf told him to, and suddenly a door appears, and it's, like, a large, beautiful bathroom. And Lily's like, you made a bathroom? Wow. And he's like, listen, it was what was on the mind. He just goes in and uses the bathroom. And then leaves, and he's like, it works. I don't know why I thought
iconic of him.
Once I thought of that, I was like, it's going Remus. In. I can't not put that in. That's just a full Remus move right there. They did, unfortunately, when they confirmed that this was indeed the come-and-go room that the house elf was talking about, the house elf told him that the reason you won't find anything written about it is because it's, like, ingrained in the magic that you can only hear about it from word of mouth. Oh. Like, it's, like, an oral tradition in order for people to find it.
That's cool.
Or, like, you just stumble across it. So they're like, oh, we can't put this on the map, but, like, and they're maybe trying to figure out if there's some way to mark it, but then they're like, what if we're going to keep the integrity of the tradition, and we're just not going to do anything. So they end up giving up, but they're like, it's still fun.
But they still figured it out.
Like, yeah, they still figured it out. Yeah. And for a second, like, Remus is, like, so excited to tell the others about this. Aww. And then he's like, oh, I can't do that. And he's like, well, I could tell Sirius, but, like, I really just want to tell James because he would be so excited by this. But anyway, yeah. Anyway, so then eventually, a full week after the incident, James finally comes to his senses.
This is the week that James finally can stay quiet for 24 hours. He's just not upset.
Oh my gosh, yeah. But no, James has, like, gone through this whole thing of, like, being so mad at him and then, like, all of this stuff. But he comes to his senses with the help from his parents, who sent him a letter that was like, listen, James, Remus is in the right here. Sorry to tell you this, but, like, he was perfectly... You know, it was a perfectly valid decision for him to make to do what he did. So it's up to you what you want to do, you know? So he decides to talk with him. And Remus comes up to the dorm, and everybody's awake, and they ask him if he's, like, ready to talk. And he's like, I'm ready if you are. And they are, so they do. And James is still like, listen, I still don't see what's wrong with beating up literal Death Eaters. I'm sorry. He's like, but I stand by that. It is okay to beat up people who are being horrible. And Remus is like, okay, but here's the thing. Snape is not a Death Eater yet. And, like, Lily pointed out to us that if we weren't so horrible, maybe Snape would have, like, had a place to go if he ever decided not to do it. But now... what's he gonna do? He's, like, only gonna be a Death Eater now. And so he's like, we're beating up, like, every Slytherin. Yeah. Like, that's not good, you know? He's like, and no one is gonna get anywhere by fighting in Hogwarts, you know? It's not gonna happen. And then Sirius points out the fact, he's like, yeah, and James, he's like, we went way too far. We were literally just laughing and, like, doing it for the crowd. It was, like, not a good thing. So they kind of figure it out, and James is like, yeah, okay, fine. Like, I would still rather, like, do whatever you want me to do rather than lose you as a friend and break up the gang. The boys.
He's like, so, I wouldn't do that to the boys. And oh my gosh.
James would unironically use, like, the boys. With,
like, and James was like, you know what? No, I'm leaving again.
No, but if James had a phone, he would be like, they would have a group chat, and it would be the boys, and it would have, like, the ice emoji, and, like, like 100 emojis.
Oh, James.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, but they're trying to figure out what to do, and so he's like, okay, what do you want us to do? And Remus is immediately like, no more spells, no more hexes, nothing. And James is like, dude. He's like, that seems like a lot. And James is like, okay, what about in self-defense? And Remus is like, in self-defense? Sure, but in retaliation? No. And James is like, this is too much. But anyway, they end up all agreeing on that, and that's what they decide to do. And everybody would at least try to, like, stop cold turkey. But the one thing was, like, Remus was like, why are we even doing pranks? And they're like, listen, we have to keep on doing pranks. They just can't be mean pranks anymore. We gotta just do it. And he's like, nobody got hurt by, like, having their skin turned red and gold. And he's like, it was fine.
It's like, we literally did it to ourselves.
He's like, it was good. He's like, okay, we can keep on doing stuff like that, but, like, we have to stop, like, fighting about all of this and everything. So, you know, that's all nice. That comes to a good conclusion. They all agree. And they're finally like, okay, I'm so glad that we're back. We're having a good time. All is well. And then Peter's like, okay, but there's one more thing. What about Lily?
Lily.
So yeah, the next scene. They all go down to breakfast together. The gang is back. Hogwarts is like, oh, the squad, they've returned. Like, the boys.
The boys.
Yeah. So Lily sees them all walk in together, and she sees the three of them sit down, and she's like, oh, well, that's something. And then she sees, and then Remus walks up to her, and she's like, so, you guys made up? And he's like, yep, we did. They apologized. They said they're not going to hex anybody from now on. And she's like, sure. Good luck with that. She's like, that sounds great. And he's like, no, they're, like, actually going to do it. Like, I really believe in them. Yeah, she's like, I'm not sure how much I buy that at all. But she's like, yeah, I'm glad you have your friends back. You can go sit with them. Like, I won't be mad. Just, like, I won't be mad unless you, like, stop talking to me altogether. And he's like, oh, no, Lily, you don't get it. I'm actually here to invite you to sit with us. And she's like, no.
She's like, I'm not, she's like, that might be a bit too much
She looks horrified. She's like, this is not how I envisioned this going down. She's like, no, thanks, Remus. I'm good sitting here alone. I feel like this is great. And he's like, no, but, like, I'm not. It looks like I'm abandoning you. And, like, the whole school is going to be like, they broke up.
No.
No, but she's like, I'm not doing it. And
he's like, you're fine with Peter, and the rest aren't that bad.
Yeah. But she's like, I'm not sitting with them. He's like, Lily, they're not monsters. And she's like, but they're annoying. And he's like, yeah. He's like, but they can be endearing. He's like, Lily, you don't even have to say anything. Just sit by me, just over there. And she's like, no, I'm not doing it. He's like, Lily, you have to do it. She's like, I'm not doing it. It just became a whole thing. And then finally, she just looks at him for a very, very long time. And then she just picks up her plate and walks over and puts it down by them. And she sits down, and James is like, hi, Evans. And she's like, shut up. And that's the end.
Shut up. Honestly, iconic.
Yeah.
I liked that one.
Yeah. It was a fun one. We love Lily. Becoming friends with them. No, she's not friends with them yet. That hasn't happened. Actually, that won't happen until like
ever.
Well into
actually,
Lily actually never becomes friends with James. She's
Tragic.
like, wow. Okay, why do I have 81 messages? Oh, because they're... Because we're planning a dress up like one of our teachers' day.
Oh.
Oh my word, that's so bad. Okay, anyway. Yeah, but what are your thoughts?
I'm feeling a lot better. I was still very upset yesterday.
You were very mad.
I was.
I got a lot of angry texts
I know.
from several people that I know in real life who listened to it. My mom hadn't listened to it yet, so I don't know her opinions on it. But I got some angry texts from those. A text from a friend of ours who texted both of us and was like, "I'm mad at Elizabeth." She was like, "Emma's
she
cool,
was
but,
very
I hate
upset.
Elizabeth."
I was upset.
Listen,
yeah.
Well, yeah. I hope I made up for it a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah. It was only James. It was only James who was really affected by that. Everybody else was like, this will be fine. He'll get over it or whatever. But yeah, and I'm glad that Lily knows about the map.
Mm-hmm. Good for her.
Because she'll be very excited for that. But yeah, do we have anything else to say before we jump into the last episode of the season?
Wow.
I know, I'm not prepared for the end of it.
I don't think I'm prepared either.
I know. It'll be great though. We'll do so good. But yeah, I have to turn this chat on silent. It is too much. Like, they're literally Matt. So we're trying to figure out how to dress like our teacher. I'm gonna keep this part of the podcast. We're trying to figure out how to dress like one of our teachers, and Matt was like, let's draw on fake beards, and we're like, Matt, we're wearing masks. We can't do that. Do it on. Oh my gosh, it was funny. Highlights of the episode: Lily was great.
Mm-hmm.
Remus was having so much fun this episode. Remus was like, you know what, this is great. I am happy with this.
I love that Sirius was like upset, but he was also like
he's
respectable.
He's like, respect. I get it. That's my homie right there. I like Remus. Alright. I'm like scared to end this out. I don't want to. Alright, let's just do it. Alright. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. Yeah, as always, cover art is Himalaya Black. Music is Benji Wilson. And yeah, we'll see you Tuesday for the final episode. Bye!